Okay, hi everyone. I'm going to start on time. I won't wait for people to come in. Whoever comes in will come in. And as I started to tell you before, I attended a wonderful class this week on Beit Avichai about David. It was supposed to be David and his women, but she mostly focused on David. And so I thought that I would, since I taught you last year or 2 years ago about Michal, I thought I would give a little background to Michal, which sort of explains a lot of stuff to us. So let me first of all share the screen. Share the screen. Oh yeah, look, so the last time I did this was in 22. So let me change this, 24, 25. So what I basically added is to give us a little bit of background, because basically my take, I mean, I'm going a little bit further than Orit went, but I think that he has an inferiority complex and is incapable of love. I mean, this was my take on Orit's whole week that she spent with us. She didn't actually say that, but that's my take. So just to show you where it's all coming from. So this is in 1 Samuel, I think 16, and the next passage is 1 Samuel 17. So Samuel comes to find a new king, right? He's disgusted with Saul, and he comes to find a new king. And God tells him to go to Bethlehem, to the house of Jesse, and to invite him to the feast. And I will make known to you, this is God speaking, I will make known to you what you shall do. You shall anoint for me the one I point out to you. So Samuel does what God commands. He comes to Bethlehem, and everyone comes out to, scared to death. What's he coming there for? They're really scared. Maybe, they're in trouble. Says, no, don't worry. I've come to sacrifice to God. Join me in a feast. And he also instructed Jesse and his sons to come as well. And then they come, and he sees the oldest. And the oldest apparently is very good looking and tall and whatever. And he says, that must be the one who I should anoint. And it's very funny. It's sort of ironic because Saul was very tall and good looking. And, Samuel was impressed with him. Right, and we saw how that turned out. So although we could talk about that another time, I think Saul got a bum rap, but we could talk about that another time. And so, but God says, no, don't pay attention to the way he looks. I've rejected him, right? For God sees not as humans see. Humans see only what is visible, but God sees into the heart. And then this is like a Cinderella story, and then Jesse calls the next one, and the next one, and all 7 of his sons, all right? And finally, Samuel says to him, God has not chosen any of these. Do you have anybody else? Are these all the boys you have? And he replied, yeah, that's sort of like an afterthought. They're still the youngest. He's tending the flock. And Samuel said to Jesse, send someone to bring him, for we will not sit down to eat until he gets here. So as I said, this is really like a reverse Cinderella story. So they sent and brought him. He was ruddy-cheeked, bright-eyed, and handsome. And God said, rise and anoint him, for this is the one. Samuel took the horn of oil, Hebrew is keren, and anointed him in the presence of his brothers. And the Spirit of God gripped David from that day on, and Samuel set out for Ramah. So in other words, he is now the chosen one. He's not the king yet, but he's the chosen one. And it's interesting that he's anointed with a horn of oil, keren, because when Saul was anointed, he was anointed with pach shemen, right? Pach is like inferior. It's like, I don't know how, today a pach would be a can or something like that. Something much inferior to a horn. A horn also has the idea of growing and it's chosen, and it's something more majestic. Okay, so this is one thing. In other words, nobody thinks too much of him. He's sort of like the leftover child. No one even thinks of him as being part of it. Notice he's number 8, right? There's 7 plus 1, the youngest. So he's sort of like an afterthought. And we'll look at an interesting Midrash afterwards. Okay, about that. Okay, the next time we meet up with him is in chapter 17 in 1 Samuel. And we find out again, he was a son, almost as if that story did not exist, right? The stories are one after the other, but there's no connection to the first one. He was the son of a certain Ephraite of Bethlehem, whose name was Jesse. He had 8 sons, right? And in the days of Saul, the man was already old. So the father was already old. And there was also 3 older sons who went off to fight with Saul in the war, okay? And we have the names of the 3 oldest sons. And David would go back and forth from, attending on Saul. Apparently, he is working already with Saul, okay, which we don't really know. We've had earlier stories about him, but, the famous ones with the, playing the harp and stuff like that, right, to soothe his temper. But he goes back and forth to shepherd his father's flock at Bethlehem, right? And his father tells him to take some food to the captain of the thousands, find out how your brothers are doing, and bring home some sort of token from them, maybe a letter, something, all right? And so he goes and he leaves someone in charge of the flock. He goes out with the provisions and he reaches the army and they're shouting and the Philistines are involved with each other. And David leaves his baggage with the man in charge of the baggage. He ran toward the battle line and went to greet his brothers. And then while he's talking to them, Goliath comes out. We know the story. And everyone's scared to death of him. And they were fleeing. And they're all talking about him. And they're saying words which David heard, right? He heard all these words. And he heard somebody say, you see that guy? The one who kills him will be rewarded by the king with great riches. He'll also give him his daughter in marriage and grant exemption to his father's house in Israel. Presumably exemption would mean, what do you think that would mean?
Maybe from paying taxes?
Yeah, maybe he wouldn't have to pay taxes. Maybe he wouldn't have to send his
sons off to war, yeah.
Or working, taxation doesn't have to be money. It could be work or army, right? And then David asked the man what will be done for the one who kills him. And so the tropes, told him. Now, Eliav, the oldest brother, heard him speaking. And he was angry with David. And he said, what are you doing here? Why did you come down here? And who did you leave the sheep with, right? You left your job, right? I know your impudence and your impertinence, right? It's like I know you're chutzpahnik, right? I know you're full of chutzpah, right? You have no. Let me just find the Hebrew here. The Hebrew is ani yadati et zidoncha ve'et roa livavecha, right? That's a strong accusation. This is his brother speaking to him. He didn't even give him a chance to give him the cheeses or whatever he brought him. He right away jumps on him like, what are you doing here? He clearly can't stand the sight of him for whatever the reasons are. And then he goes on and he says, oh, you must have come down for the action. You came down to watch the fighting. And David said, wait. What have I done now? I was only asking. Okay, so we have these 2 scenes, and we can see that, to use animal terms, David is the runt of the litter, right? He's like the one, or like the ugly duckling. We all know these stories, right? And here it's maybe Cinderella. The people, his brothers can't. And the question is, what's the basis for the animus, right? And we have a very interesting story. And as I said earlier, when I began, those of you who came in a bit late, as I said earlier, I'm using these 2 stories, as Orit was, to show that he possibly has an inferiority complex, and therefore, because of this, and because he was unloved and had an inferiority complex. He's going to have problems in his future life, right? And the background to this is very interesting. I'm sorry that it's in Hebrew, right? But it's very, very interesting, right? It goes on. It actually is based on a passage which is Even Ma'asu Habonim Haita LaRosh Binah. The despised stone ended up being the cornerstone of the building, all right? And that's an allusion possibly to David, all right? That's what they're going to show here, all right? So David was, there are those who said that David was loved and those who said David was unloved, all right? And what's the background story? I'm translating from the Hebrew. And the background story is that the father separated, Yishai, the father separated, of course they have to make him into the Rosh Sanhedrin. I mean, they have to put him into a modern time. But that's so important for us. He separated his wife from his wife for 3 years, right? And after 3 years, he had a maid, a pretty maid, who he fell in love with, all right? And he said, to her, come to my house tonight, all right? But the maid was loyal to her mistress, and she said to the mistress, to the mother, save me, right, and my nefesh, my soul, and your husband and my master from hell. In other words, she doesn't want to go and sleep with him, all right? And so she says to her, what should I do? There's 3 years he hasn't touched me. So she says to her, the maid says, I'll give you some advice, all right? Go and dress yourself up and go. This reminds us a little bit of the story of Leah and Rachel, right? The maid here is like Rachel and the wife is like Leah. Go get yourself dressed up and then close the door and wait, all right? And I'll go out and you'll wait in there for him and turn the light out, right? The candle, right? She does that and he comes in and he did with her all night, right? He did, I love the Hebrew, Asta imo kol halayla. He did with her. That's a direct translation. We know what he did with her all night, and she got pregnant with David, all right? And because of his love for that Shivcha, that pretty Shivcha, who might have been redheaded, David came out redheaded as opposed to all of his brothers, all right? And after 9 months, the brothers wanted to kill her and the son because they saw that he was red, right? And Yishai said, no, leave him alone. He'll be our slave. He'll be our servant, Meshu Abad, right? He'll be our slave and servant, and he'll take care of our sheep, okay? So that's the back story, okay? So when God comes to Samuel and says, go anoint him, he's the one. Yishai, the father, and the sons are standing there in horror, right? And they said, Shaul only came to make fun of us and to show us that we have a ben pasul, a son who is not worth anything, all right? Who has no value, right? And his mother, David, was very happy inside, but outside she was sad. In other words, she showed that she was sad, but inside she was really happy, right? And then at the end, his mother said, right, going back to the opening verse, Even Masu Abonim, the stone, her son, who the builders hated, ended up to be the Rosh Binah, the head, Ba'alit al Kulan, and raised himself among everyone else. Okay, and they finish with with the phrase which we all know from Hallel, also Evan Ma'asu Habonim, we know from Hallel. Okay, so this is the backstory of this. What are your thoughts about that? Let's stop for 1 second before we go on. What are your thoughts about that? Do you think it makes sense to say that because of this, because he was hated by his brothers and whatever, that this would result in his inability to really, I'm not going to say it yet, but maybe somebody here will say it, in his ability to.
The thing about David is everybody loves him. The Tanakh is full of, and Michal loved him, and Yonatan loved him, but it's never said that he loved anybody else.
Okay.
Even his name means beloved.
Okay. So, which is ironic because David, right, like the Chadodi, right, means beloved. Okay. So that's really ironic. Okay. So I'm arguing based on this, again, some of you came in just now, I'm arguing based on this lesson that I had all week long with Orit Avineri, that he's incapable of love because he really never received proper love on his own and was hated, okay? And so then Michal's story, she just falls into this, it's a tragic story. And we'll see, she's basically being used. She's an object, a political object, right? And everyone just uses her. And only at one point do we see her possibly as a subject, but otherwise it's a very tragic story. And the question is, at the very end, does she still love David? It's not clear. I don't see how she could, but we'll look here. Anyone else want to comment before we go back to the PowerPoint? Okay, so let me share the screen again. Okay, so what's really interesting is that she has a very large footprint, all right? Her name appears 18 times, and she actually has a great deal of agency in terms of the space that she has here. She loves, she speaks, she conspires, she lies, she moves, she looks, she despises, she criticizes, all right? And most of her agency is directed towards David, all right? But she's also an object, right? So on the one hand, she's a subject, but she's also an object of patriarchal actions because she's given away, right? And possibly towards the end, she's possibly likely imprisoned in 2 Samuel, and she is probably made barren. We don't know if she's barren, by nature, or David made it his business to make sure that she did not have children, or maybe he couldn't get it up with her. Who knows? We don't really know. So she has a life, thoughts, and feelings. She loves David, and she makes decisions and acts on her feelings. And she does resist the authority of her father and husband and ends up paying the price. Let's look at a little genealogy here, right? And where she appears, right? And also where she fits into all of David's women, right? So what's really interesting is Meirav bat Achinoam is supposed to be given to David. She's the elder, but in the end, she's not. So first of all, David, who was promised the oldest one, is not going to get the oldest one. So that in itself is very interesting, right? He's getting the second one, right? And then, strangely enough, Michal, also bat Achinoam, they're sisters, also Saul's daughter. We know that there's also a brother, Jonathan, right? Is given to another after her marriage, and she ends up also being a living widow in the end. And notice the span here. This is 1 Samuel 18, and here 19, and 2 Samuel 3 and 6, all right? And also 1 Samuel 25. Oh, no, sorry, that's already Abigail. Okay, so that's Michal. Then we have Abigail, and then we have Achinoam, right? Who strangely enough, right? It's not clear. It doesn't seem as if Achinoam could be the same Achinoam. It says Achinoam of Jezreel. So presumably that's a different Achinoam, I would like to think, right? Okay.
Yeah, in the Achinoam married to Saul was she had a different father's name. I don't remember now what it was, but
Okay.
they
Anyway,
are identified differently.
right.
Which doesn't mean that the Midrash doesn't sometimes try to make them the same, but
right. But it's interesting. There's so many names to choose from. Why? And then you have Macha, right? So Achinoam is the mother of Amnon, right? And that's the story with Amnon and Tamar, who rapes his half sister. Then you have Macha, who is the mother of Avshalom, and also the daughter Tamar, who ends up being raped by Amnon, and Avshalom, who saves her honor, right? Who then kills Amnon, right? Then you have Chagit, who is the mother of David's fourth son, and he's the one who's going to try to take over the throne on David's deathbed, right? And then you have here Abital with the fifth son, who we know nothing about, Shephatiah, and then somebody whose name is Eglah, who has a sixth son. And then we have Bathsheba, who is the mother of Solomon, right? We know the story of Bathsheba. We discussed her last week or 2 weeks ago. And she has other sons as well. And strangely enough, she has a son whose name is Nathan, right? And remember, there's Nathan the prophet. So again, that's not clear what's going on here, that she has all these people. Okay. So that's so much for genealogy. And so Michal in the Bible is, right? So we first meet her here, okay? So after Saul secured his kingship over Israel, he waged war, right? He defeated the Amalekites, he saved Israel, and he had sons. He had 3 sons, Yonatan, Ishvi, and Malchi-Shua, and they all show up later in the future. And the names of his daughters were Merav the older and Michal the youngest, right? And then the next time we see Michal is after he does what he does. After he does what he does, right? He says that he's going to give Merav as he promised, the elder one, but at that time she marries someone else. Okay, and the question is, when it says she was given in marriage, very interesting, because who do you think gives her in marriage? The father, presumably. So in other words, he's playing games with David. Now Michal, daughter of Saul, had fallen in love with David. She loved him. She wanted him. And Saul was very pleased, right? He could use this love. So right away, from the father's perspective, she is going to be a snare. It's funny, the word snare in Hebrew, I'd have to check the Hebrew, I don't have a Bible in front of me, is usually a mokesh. And what is a mokesh in Hebrew today?
Mines.
A mine. And what happens with mines?
They blow up.
They blow up, right? And very often mines are a snare. You plant them in different places and you trip over them and you blow up. It's I'm pretty sure that the word is mokesh here, but I may be wrong. Anyway, so she could serve as a snare for him so that the Philistines may kill him. He already wants to kill David already, right? Why would he want to kill David so early? He's just saved the whole world.
Because people are cheering David on.
Right.
He already feels threatened in terms of loyalty.
Right. The famous thing, David Yefei Einayim, right? And then it continues. He has beautiful eyes. And Shaul the Shaul the Rivervotav and the thousands, the David the, forget the words,
Tens of thousands.
and tens of thousands, I forget the word in Hebrew, okay? And so he's popular, he's a threat, all right? So, so Saul says to his courtiers to say to David privately, the king is fond of you and all his courtiers like you, so why not become the king's son-in-law, right? And he has to pay a price. What's the price? The price is, the price is he has to kill, he has to bring foreskins, 100 foreskins. So David does even more. He kills 200 Philistines and brings 200 foreskins, right? And they were counted out to the king that he might become the king's son-in-law, okay? And then he gets Saul in marriage. But when Saul realized that the Lord was with David and that Michal, daughter of Saul, loved him, Saul grew still more afraid of David, and Saul was David's enemy ever after. So we have here we have a picture of the bringing the heads, right, of the Philistines to the king. And here we have a picture of the king taking Michal's arm.
It's actually funny because he didn't bring heads, he brought foreskins, but I guess that wasn't very
but here's
how are we going to show that artistically?
Well, now we can see it here, okay? See all the foreskins here on the table. And you can see the dead Philistines in the background. And here's another one, right? Here's David counting, right? 187, right? He's counting them out. So, and they really do look like foreskins. Chamudim, right? Okay. Okay, then the next thing is, as we know, he would be playing the harp and everything, right? And on a regular basis. And then one night, an evil spirit comes upon Saul, and he has a spear in his hand, and he instead of striking the spears for David, he strikes the spear into the wall, and he realizes that David things are dangerous for him, and Saul sent messages to David's house to keep watch over him and put him to death in the morning. And Michal basically saves him. Michal, his wife, told David, saying, you don't get yourself away tonight, tomorrow you'll be dead. And so Michal let down David from the window, which reminds us of whom?
Rapunzel.
Rapunzel, okay. But who else? Think Bible.
Yeah.
We studied her also not too long ago.
Well, the spies going down.
Exactly. And he went off and fled and got away, which is exactly like the spies, all right? From Saul's point of view, his son-in-law to him is like, the spies. And so what did Michal do? She took the household gods, which in Hebrew are called terafim, which reminds us of whom?
Rachel.
Okay, so Michal, the younger daughter, is like Rachel, the younger daughter, okay? And she put them in the bed, and she a twist of both hair, and she put it at his head and covered them with the cloth. That's what she creates some sort of a dummy, right? And Saul wants to take David, and he's ill, and Saul sent messengers, bring him to me, and the messengers they saw this, and of course, Saul is infuriated. Why have you thus deceived me and let my enemy go? And he got away. And Michal said to Saul, he said to me, let me go. Why should I kill you? Right? He said that basically that David forced her. Okay, so she is still in good graces with her father. What's really very interesting is this idea of deception, which also reminds us of Rachel and also reminds us a little bit of Jacob, right? And even reminds us a little bit of Rebecca. who deceived Isaac.
Isaac.
And by the way, it almost seems to be like it's a family trait, what you have here. It's very interesting. And so here, this picture really reminds us of the spies. Here's Michal in the window, and here's David escaping. All right, and in the middle of the night, you have a moon here, and you have some sort of. Anyway, it's a very interesting take on this. And here's another picture. Whoops, which I brought just to show you. Very much like, right? Michal lets David escape from the window. And here, when you see this, it really reminds us of all the pictures we saw of spies with the cord, right? Okay. So here we have a little bit of a sad story. This is a quotation from Amy Kalmanovsky, who's a wonderful, wonderful Bible scholar. Very, very off-the-wall interpretations. Every time I get a chance to listen to her, when I go to conferences, I really just adore listening to her. And she has a book which is called Dangerous Sisters of the Hebrew Bible. Sue, would you like to read this?
Sure. Michal informed Saul that David threatened to kill her and therefore coerced her into betraying her father. The interesting fact that she remains in David's house and does not escape with him lends credence to her lie. Michal does not escape with David because she would not accompany someone who threatened her life. In truth, the text does not reveal the real reason why Michal does not leave with David. Both David J.A. Klein's and Exum suggest that it was not Michal's choice to remain behind. Michal remains because David chooses not to take her with him. Unlike Klein's and Exum, I suggest that Michal continues to exert agency and chooses not to escape with David. Although not explicitly stated, her choice to remain behind, I suggest, reveals a core loyalty to her father and a desire not to break ties with him completely.
Okay, let's stop here before we come to the next part. So you have two different takes. I actually like the first take, right? I like this first take because it fits in better with the thesis that David doesn't want any burdens. He doesn't really care for her. And, her only worth might have been, to get into the king's family. But now that the king's trying to kill him, she's, if anything, a liability. He doesn't need her. All right. On the other hand, maybe at this point she, following what Amy is saying, maybe it's possible that she is correct. Maybe she already senses something wrong with David, all right? And maybe she thinks maybe I'll be safer with my father than I am with my husband. Anyway, very, very interesting. We have these two choices. Okay, unlike Rachel.
Unlike Rachel and Leah, Michal does not abandon her father for her husband. Although she defies him and helps his rival, Michal remains tied to her natal household. Her lie to her father enables Michal to maintain this linkage, since Saul cannot blame a threatened woman for helping his rival escape. Unsurprisingly, it is Michal's relationship to David that appears strained, if not severed, after this episode. Once Michal helps David escape, she does not speak with her husband again until he returns as king. Like Rachel's, Michal's deception proves effective, but her actions have enormous consequences. David escapes, lives as an outlaw, and marries other women.
Okay, now this is really interesting. Just let's go back to that Midrash that we saw earlier, right? The Midrash that we saw earlier. Where was that? It was in Hebrew, right? The Midrash that we saw earlier, that the father who was separated from his wife for 3 years while he was supposedly studying or whatever he was doing, or ended up being interested in another woman. Okay? So it's very interesting that you can almost say he's repeating something which he already saw earlier in his life, which I think is interesting. Okay, so we're over here. Right, Michal quickly enters.
Michal re-enters the narrative when the text lists David's new wives. Abigail quickly arose and mounted an ass with 5 maidservants attending her. She followed David's messengers and became his wife. David took Ahinoam of Jezreel, and both of them became his wives. Saul gave Michal, his daughter, David's wife, to Palti, son of Laish from Galim. Clearly, Michal has returned to her father's house and is under his direct control once again. For a second time, Saul overturns his daughter's marriage, this time giving Michal to Palti.
So we have here, notice how she's sort of out of the picture, but meanwhile, she's living with Palti. And that in itself also becomes very, the Palti son of Laish, right? Robert Alter's commentary here, right, is that when Saul gives Michal to Palti, this is really illegal, right? It's true that he now has 2 wives, right? But that's not a justification, because since you did have the practice of polygamy in those days, right? He could have done this even if he were living under the same roof with. So in other words, clearly Saul's motive is political, to deprive him of one claim to the throne. If he's no longer married to Michal, he has no claims on the, right? On the other hand, if you look at the text, oh, I don't have the text here, do I? Anyway, I don't have the text here, but the text is that he gave David's wife, right? He gave David's wife, oh, here it is. He gave Michal, his daughter, David's wife. In other words, it's clear that she's his wife, okay? And so we can only guess what Michal feels about all of this, all right? But what we will find out later is Palti's feelings for Michal. I don't remember if it's here or not, but he actually cries. He actually cries when he's forced to return her. And then we now have here a very famous passage where in 2 Samuel 6, when David brings the ark to Jerusalem, and Michal is looking out of the window, and she sees him dancing, right, in front of the ark. She looks out of the window, Nishkafa ba'ad hachalom, which we last week, I think we talked about women looking out of the windows. And we have Sisera, and we have Michal, and we have a man looking out of the window who saw Rebecca and Jacob. And she saw David leaping and whirling before the Lord, and she despised him for him, right? The Hebrew words are much stronger. They're words that have z in it, right? They have the z sound, right? Fazes, right? Because he's really doing pretty, and by the way, I was laughing about this the other day. We don't know if he had, in those days, men did not necessarily have underpants on. So it's quite possible that, he was visible when he was dancing around, okay? And so, okay, so she now sees who he is, all right? And David comes home after this long time to greet his household. We don't know if this is before she's been given away or after she's been given away. It's very hard to know in terms of the Bible. But anyway, or maybe she's been taken back. We don't know where it is in terms of time, everything. There's no real timeline here. And she says to him, didn't the king of Israel do himself honor today, exposing himself today in the sight of the slave girls of his subjects as one of the Brira might expose himself? David answered Michal, it was before the Lord who chose me instead of your father and all his family, and appointed me ruler over the Lord's people, Israel. And apparently God is on David's side, because it then says, so to her dying day, Michal, daughter of Saul, notice here she's not Michal, David's wife, here she's Michal, daughter of Saul, had no children. Okay? Very, very interesting take here. And here's a picture of Michal watching from a window. By the way, I think I've seen the same picture here, the same exact picture, her sister's wife looking out of the window. I think it's been used interchangeably by many. And here you have Michal, here's Michal, here watching David dancing around like a whirlwish, right? Like it's really an ecstatic type of a dance, all right? And what's interesting is you don't see women here. You only see men here. So it's very interesting that comes up. Okay, and then later on, he's actually, so later on or earlier?
This is earlier.
Earlier, because this is 2 Samuel 6, and this is 2 Samuel 3. So earlier on, Michal is given back, right? David goes to Ishbosheth, son of Saul, and says, give back my wife, Michal, right? So here she's his wife, who had the throne for the 100 foreskins. Actually, it was 200, not 100, as we know. And her husband went with her, weeping as he went after her as far as Bahurim. And Avner says, go back. Just could not separate us. And here you have here, we don't know who Paltiel is, we don't know who he is, he doesn't speak a word, but he's crying the whole time, which is in contrast to David, who uses her, right? David uses her. And he apparently, we don't know about Michal's feelings, but we certainly know about Paltiel's feelings, who loves her and who's broken man by the fact that he was given to him by Saul, and he came to love her, and now he has to give her up. And I would assume that she was happy with him, but he has no choice.
Yeah, my interpretation of the whole set of stories is that Michal, I wouldn't say she really loved David. I think it was like a teenage infatuation, quote unquote, love at first sight. He was the big hero, he was handsome, and he had just had this amazing victory. And when she helps him escape, she begins to realize that maybe he's really a cad when he leaves her behind. And whether Saul had the marriage annulled or however, she ended up with Palti, and Palti's reaction to me shows that there was true love between the two of them. David doesn't ask for Michal back because he loved her. He asked for her back because it's a political move on his part to keep her, his connection alive, his claim alive to the as a follow-up to as the inheritor of the house of Saul. And he already has a lot of other wives. He's really not interested in her for his emotional or even his physical needs. It's a political move on his part. She's paying the price because I think she had a happy marriage with Paltiel, as seen by Paltiel's reaction when she's taken away. And I just think she's such a tragic figure because of that.
She's really a tragic figure. And again, she's referred to as daughter of Saul, which supports what you just said, that he wants her for political reasons, maybe to cement the crown. Right? Now, in the Midrash, we don't really have to look at Michal in the Midrash, but it's very interesting that people saw her as a beautiful and that she was David's favorite wife. I mean, the Midrash really sees an interest in the fact that Michal saves his life means they're going to like her no matter what. All right. So and so they basically the fact that she chose David over her father makes them love her. All right. So but they can't have Michal and Paltiel living together as a married couple. If they did not engage in intercourse. God forbid that they should engage in intercourse, because if he would have engaged in intercourse, then David could not come, right? David could not
take her back.
Take her back. So they take from his name Paltiel. Midrash is funny. Paltiel, Palat El. Palat is he, instead of impregnating her, right? Instead of, what is what floats?
To ejaculate.
Ejaculate, thank you, I couldn't think of the word. So, in other words, he ejaculated too, right? He ejaculated because of God. Palat El, God sees to the fact that he is ejaculating not into her, but just ejaculating. And a niflat from sin, they are the same word. He's saved from sin. So they take his name, Paltiel, and it's really funny. And then they say he overcame his sexual urge to such an extent that he was regarded as a woman and not a man, right? And maybe that explains why he's crying so much, right? Because he's crying like a woman. I love what the rabbis do. They have such imagination. It's so funny that they can't, imagine anything else, all right? And on the other hand, Saul, the evil Saul, from the rabbi's point of view, right? Anyone who's threatening the beloved David, whom they all love, he couldn't care less. He went against the halacha, and he gave a married woman to another, Eshet Ish, right? And that's why he was punished by losing his kingship, right? So anyway, it's very interesting. And for some reason, the sages have her putting on tefillin every day, right? So, and this is famously reported by Rashi, who some people say that Rashi's daughters put on tefillin as well. But I don't know. That's, where that's coming from. So where are we? Okay. So here, I just want to point out that there's lots and lots of poetry, of course, about this. And Rachel actually wrote something. Rachel Blaustein wrote something about this. And we had, if you have not read the Book of Kings, the Secret Book of Kings, in Hebrew, Melachim Gimel, go right now and buy the book or take it out of the library. It's wonderful, wonderful reading. I think it's the best Midrash ever. And she bases it all on sources. And I won't ruin anything for you by giving you anything about the plot. You have to read this book, The Secret Book of Kings, all right? She also wrote a wonderful book about Akiva. And I originally read the book in Hebrew. I actually thought the Hebrew was better than the English. Did you read it in Hebrew or in English, Sue?
Hebrew.
Yeah. Did you also read it in English?
No.
I read it in English as well, but the Hebrew is much better. So also Michal, and this is what we're going to take a quick look at. It's relatively short. Last time I invited Judith Cates to join us 2 or 3 years ago when I last taught this, and so she has a midrash based on her husband is prominent in the gates, right? So that's who is that? Her husband. That's Michal, who saved her husband David from death. All right. And in the end, her father said, "You deceived me," and she said it was to save you from shedding innocent blood. What did he say then? No one can lay hands on me. Lord's anointed. And this is from the Midrash HaGadol, and it appears in this book. But also Judith Cates put together a collection called Reading Ruth, and also Beginning Anew. 2 wonderful connections there. I don't remember, they go back quite a while. I have them in my library, but quite a while. So she has here Michal speaking. Let's see, how long is it? It's not that long. So, okay, so Louise, you read the first page. Susan Sferis reads the second page. And Joyce, you read the third page, okay? So here's the first
Okay.
page.
I have a completely different story to tell. Yes, I love David, but not because I was the fairy tale princess languishing in the palace of my ogre father, the Mad King, and not because I was waiting to be rescued by that oh so handsome, so strong young soldier, the idol of all those singing women. No, I wanted to play my part in the national drama, the transformation of our people into a great kingdom ruled by God's beloved. Don't think I didn't know the meaning of David's name, friend of or loved one of God. When I saved David, I became God's partner in creating our history. It was all very well for God to send Samuel to anoint him. That didn't hide him from the knives of the assassins. God needs humans to carry out divine designs. I was brought up to know the destiny of royal daughters. My father expected to use me as he had my sister Merab. But younger daughters are sometimes indulged, even by stubborn patriarchs. So my father let me satisfy my appetite for learning. He never bothered to think about what I was learning. When my brother Jonathan's tutors taught him Torah, I too studied Torah, along with statecraft. Just like Jonathan, I understood for myself that God's choice had fallen on that unlikely shepherd from Bethlehem. But anyone who thinks about the stories of our ancestors knows that our God is the God of surprises. God can raise up the poor from the dust to set them with the great men of his people. Yes, I appreciated the love poetry David wrote for God. I didn't need him to write poetry for me. In a crisis, I could wrap myself in the spiritual mantle of my mother's Rachel. Oops, wait a minute, something just covered it. And Rebecca. Then I could invent schemes to rescue that chosen younger son, my husband, Israel's true king.
But I couldn't rescue myself. If only David could have seen in me anything beyond Saul's daughter. He never understood how much like Jonathan I could be for him, a friend and partner in his search to do God's will. How ironic that only much later, a few rabbis, searching our texts for hints of the ways of God, saw fragments of whom I was. They preserve the memory of my spiritual life. I may have been silent in the palace, but I spoke with God. I bowed myself with words of Torah, praying in tefillin. The sages of our people respected this and even recorded it in their Talmud. The rabbis who praised me because I ensured my husband's renown were short-sighted. Others knew which verse really belongs to me. She is clothed with strength and splendor, and she rejoices at the last day. Clothed with strength because I wore tefillin, which are strengths, and signify my personal path to God. Guided by this verse, they saw the need to read my story differently. Where it says that I had no child to the day I died, they understood that I gave birth and rejoiced on the day I died, just like my mother Rachel. If you look between the lines of David's glorious history and gather up the rabbinic fragments, you can find my story of strength.
I hope my story helps you to see how careful you must be when reading women's stories in the Bible. Do you understand the risks I took acting as I did while living in my father's palace? I drew strength from a tradition of women being as daring and inventive as could be, given the narrow confines in which we had to work. We have learned that it is possible to exercise power, to act effectively under severe constraints, even when our world considers us merely instruments of more important plans. But we have also learned the limitations of female power. While a life of service to important men can be a source of significance for a woman, it could also be the means of her self-effacement. You must question the assumptions you make about what is valuable in women's lives. The biblical texts may be ambiguous about whether or not I ever gave birth to a child, but it clearly equates childlessness and failure. Like me, you need not accept this. You can see in my path, in my life path, the possibility of another kind of success. We can bring new life into the world, not only as mothers, but also as spiritual teachers.
Okay, so this is a completely different take than what we discussed now, but okay, there's nothing wrong with seeing something positive. And here too, you have, just to bring it to your attention, we don't have that much time right now, but just to bring to your attention, this whole concept of womanist Midrash by Wilda Yasmi. She's a wonderful, wonderful scholar, and you might want to look for her Midrash, all right? And there's also Alice Walker, who today is another Black woman, and so you can see she's also womanist. The term womanist, right? The term womanist started out with Alice Walker, right? And so she says that the term derives from the Black folk expression womanish, for female adolescents exhibiting adult behavior inappropriate for their age, right? So very interesting that this is later adopted for, a Black feminist of color. So I think this is really very interesting. She also says a woman is to feminist as purple is to lavender. I'm not quite sure if I understand that, but I love the quotation. Anyway, is purple stronger than lavender in terms of colors? Yeah, right. Lavender is like very pale, right?
Lavender is softer. Lavender is like a light purple.
Okay, so that does make sense. So womanist is purple, it's strong. A feminist, it's like lavender, nothing, so that's really lovely. Okay. So anyway, and then we have Yehudim Ba'im. We don't need to look at that right now, but in Yehudim Ba'im, you really see, you see Jonathan and Michal talking about how they all love David, right? And then it's actually very cute. If anyone wants to say watch it, we can. And okay, we don't need that. So I'll stop right now. Anyone want to comment? I always have a little bit of a problem with because I also wrote for that book, a little bit of a problem on the positive take, that we have in the book, the Eshet Chayil book, that's everything. I don't know if it's written for children, for teenagers, but maybe it is. Maybe it was meant to be a bat mitzvah gift for teenagers, and it would be a wonderful. And so it always has some sort of happy, positive ending. It's not very, critical of the text. On the other hand, there is a lot of feminism in it. But Sue, did you write anything about Michal?
No, I didn't. I
didn't remember.
Wrote around her. I wrote something on Meirav where she plays a big part.
Right.
But I just couldn't bring myself to to take her on.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. But as I said, Yochi Brandis has really looked for her book. It's probably available on Kindle. Those of you who read on Kindle, if not, try your libraries. It's really, she's actually a personal friend of my son. So every now and then we can get blurbs from her for our various undertakings every now and then. So nobody has any comments? Okay, I'll stop now, and if anyone wants to say anything off the record. So I'll see you people next week. 1 minute. Stop recording.